Open not on a ruin, but on a single forensic detail. Describe the sensory experience of touching a block of Puma Punku's andesite, the impossible coldness at 12,000 feet, the unnatural, glass-like smoothness, the perfect, razor-sharp, 90-degree interior corner that your finger traces, a corner that, according to the laws of primitive stonework, simply cannot exist. Now, pull back to reveal the scale. This single impossible detail is part of a 131-ton slab of rock, one of hundreds littering a high-altitude plain. This is not a ruin, it is a crime scene. A place littered with the shattered pieces of a technology that shouldn't exist. The question isn't what this place is, but what killed it. This is the body. The rest of the story is the search for the murder weapon. And now please stop the video and subscribe to our channel. To be able to keep making videos like this, we need to reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Thank you. Before we can analyze the evidence from that crime scene, before we can even begin to look for a murder weapon, you need to understand the official story. The one carved into every history book, taught in every classroom, and defended with academic authority. It's the story that tells you there was no crime here at all, just a miracle of human ingenuity. We are in the Andes Mountains, more than 12,000 feet above the sea, in the heart of a vast and powerful empire. The year is approximately 500 CE, and the rulers of this sky-high kingdom are the Tiwanaku people. They are a civilization with no written language, no wheel, and no draft animals. Yet, here on this windswept, high-altitude plain, they decided to build a monument for their gods. The accepted explanation, the one you are meant to believe, comes from the work of dedicated archaeologists like Jean-Pierre Prutzen. Through painstaking experimental archaeology, he demonstrated that it was, in theory, possible. Imagine it. Generations of laborers, their lungs burning in the thin air, using nothing more than river stones, harder than the sandstone they were shaping. Hour after hour, day after day, for centuries, they would have pounded the rock, chipping away infinitesimal amounts of material. To get the smooth finish, they would have used a simple slurry of sand and water, grinding and polishing the surfaces with a patience that borders on the superhuman. It is a story of sheer, brute force effort, a testament to the power of faith and the endurance of the human will. It's a perfect, logical, and complete narrative, and for decades, it has been considered the final word on the matter. But history is never that simple, because while the world accepted this comfortable truth, the written testimony of the very first outsiders to lay eyes on this impossible place told a completely different story. And their account begins to unravel this entire, carefully constructed explanation. That simple story of patience and primitive tools is clean, satisfying. And it would be the end of our investigation if it weren't for one major problem. The very first Europeans to see this place didn't believe it for a second. Let's go back in time to the 16th century, right after the Spanish conquest. A conquistador and chronicler named Pedro Cieza de León is traveling through this high, desolate landscape, documenting everything he sees for the Spanish crown. He is a soldier, not a poet, a man who deals in facts and observations. And when he stumbles upon the ruins of Puma Punku, his report back to the king is not one of admiration, but of pure, unadulterated confusion. He writes of gateways and platforms made from single stones, some of them 30 feet wide and 6 feet thick, all of it so perfectly joined, it looks like a single structure. And then comes the line that should have started a 500-year-long investigation. He says, and I quote, that he cannot understand or imagine what kind of instruments or tools could have been used to work them. Let that sink in. The very first outside witness, a man who had seen the great works of the Inca and the Aztecs, took one look at Puma Punku and declared it impossible. He recognized immediately that what he was seeing did not fit the technological reality of the people he had just conquered. This isn't a modern theory or a fringe idea. It is the first impression, the initial gut reaction from the man who discovered it for the Western world. It's the first documented crack in the official narrative, a deep fracture in the story we have been told. and it's been sitting in the historical record, largely ignored, for half a millennium. That 500-year-old crack in the story widens into a chasm when you stop looking at the historical record and start looking at the stone itself. Because not all the stones at Puma Punku are the same. Much of the site is built from a relatively soft red sandstone. And it's on this stone that the official explanation of pounding and grinding mostly works. But the real mystery, the artifacts that terrified Cieza de León and defy explanation today, are carved from something else entirely. It's a stone called gray andesite, a volcanic rock of incredible density and hardness. To understand the scale of the problem, you have to use a simple forensic tool: the Mohs scale of hardness, which ranks materials from 1 to 10. The andesite at Puma Punku is a 6 to 7 on that scale, nearly as hard as granite or quartz. Now, consider the tools available to the Tiwanaku. Their most advanced metallurgy was a primitive form of arsenic bronze, which has a Mohs hardness of about 3.5. They also had stone hammers, but even the hardest of those would struggle to do more than crudely smash a material this resilient. So, let me ask you a question. Can you imagine trying to carve a granite countertop with a copper pipe? Can you imagine trying to create not just a rough shape, but a complex, multifaceted object with that tool? That is the physical, scientific impossibility we are faced with. But the hardness of the stone isn't even the most disturbing part of the story. The real horror lies not in the material itself, but in the wounds left upon it, in the impossible precision of the cuts that violate every known rule of primitive stonework. That physical impossibility escalates into something far stranger when you stop looking at the material and start looking at the tool marks left behind. To do that, we have to move away from archaeology and into the world of precision engineering, to the work of men like Christopher Dunn. Dunn is a man who has spent his life working in advanced manufacturing, and when he looks at the stones of Puma Punku, he doesn't see primitive handicrafts. He sees evidence of sophisticated machining. Let's start with a concept called planar flatness. Some of the andesite surfaces at Puma Punku are flat to within a tolerance of thousandths of an inch. That is a level of precision that is difficult to achieve today without very large, very stable machines. But the most damning piece of evidence, the single detail that shatters the official narrative, is something much smaller. It is the existence of perfectly sharp, 90-degree interior corners. Think about how primitive tools work. Pounding and grinding is a process of abrasion. It wears material away. When you try to grind out an inside corner, the tool will inevitably wear away the edges, creating a rounded curve, or what engineers call a fillet. It is physically impossible to produce a perfectly sharp interior corner through abrasion. Yet, they are everywhere at Puma Punku, cut into one of the hardest stones on Earth. These are not the marks of a human hand patiently grinding for centuries. They are the clean, cold, geometric signature of a high-speed cutting tool. They are the wounds left by a machine. If those sharp interior corners are the signature of a machine, then the drill holes are its fingerprints, left all over the hardest stone at the crime scene. Scattered across various andesite blocks are holes that are, for all intents and purposes, perfect. They are uniformly circular, maintaining a consistent diameter through their entire depth. But the truly damning evidence isn't the hole itself, it's the pattern left on the inside wall. When examined closely, you can see fine, evenly spaced spiral grooves. In modern manufacturing, these are called feed lines, and they are the unmistakable fingerprint of a powered drill bit. They are created as the rotating cutter advances into the material at a steady, consistent rate. A handheld tool, twisted by human power, would wobble, creating an uneven hole. A primitive bow drill, using sand as an abrasive, would leave vertical scratches, not a consistent spiral groove. These marks tell a story of a stable machine, holding a hardened bit, rotating at a high speed, and advancing with a controlled pressure. It is, by every definition, evidence of machining. This is the smoking gun. It is the bullet casing found at a Stone Age crime scene, a piece of remnant technology so far out of its time that it completely shatters the official history we have been told. We have now seen the murder weapon, But the true scale of this crime, the sheer, brutal audacity of it, only becomes clear when you step back from the individual stones and look at the logistics of the entire operation. The largest single stone at Puma Punku, a slab called the plataforma lithica, is estimated to weigh 131 metric tons. To put that in perspective, that's the weight of about 25 large elephants. Other blocks routinely weigh in at over 85 tons. The official story asks you to believe these were moved by a Stone Age people. But where did they move them from? The softer red sandstone was quarried about 10 kilometers away, a monumental task in itself. But the andesite, the impossibly hard stone with the machine-like cuts and drill holes, comes from a quarry on the Copacabana Peninsula. That is a distance of 90 kilometers, or about 55 miles. A journey that required crossing a significant stretch of the frigid, deep waters of Lake Titicaca. Now, picture the scene. A civilization with no wheel, no draft animals like oxen or horses, and no written language to coordinate a project of this magnitude, is somehow quarrying, transporting, and then precisely machining 131-ton blocks of granite hard stone. They are doing this at an altitude of over 12,000 feet, where the air is so thin that modern tourists struggle to breathe, and where there are no large hardwood trees to use as rollers. This is not just a mystery. It is a logistical nightmare that pushes the boundaries of human possibility. It's a feat of giants. Even if you could solve the impossible logistics, even if you could explain how a Stone Age culture moved a mountain of granite hard rock 55 miles, you are still left with the most disturbing evidence at Puma Punku: the artifacts themselves. Scattered amongst the colossal slabs are dozens of smaller, far more complex objects known as H-blocks. They are the absolute culmination of every impossibility we've discussed. Carved from the hardest gray andesite, each block is a masterpiece of geometric complexity, featuring more than 80 faces, angles, and planes. And they are all rendered with the same cold, machine-like precision as the larger stones. But the most shocking detail isn't their complexity, it's their uniformity. These are not unique, hand-carved works of art. They are standardized, interlocking components. They are proof of mass production, of a single template followed to a degree of accuracy that is simply astonishing. They look less like building blocks and more like the inner workings of some great machine, or a Lego set for giants. Their design is so complex, so utterly non-essential for any known primitive construction purpose, that it feels completely alien. You have to ask yourself, why? Why go to all this impossible effort to create dozens of identical, geometrically perfect, interlocking components? Faced with an impossible material, machined with impossible precision, moved with impossible logistics, and shaped into an impossibly complex and uniform design, how does the official story possibly hold up? The academic response to that question is almost as disturbing as the stones themselves. Here is where the investigation takes a dark turn, away from the ancient stones and into the modern halls of academia. On one side, you have the forensic evidence presented by engineers and manufacturing experts like Christopher Dunn, men who spend their lives working with the physical realities of shaping hard materials. They present a case based on tool marks, precision measurements, and the unmistakable signatures of machining. On the other side, you have the mainstream archaeological conclusion, represented by figures like Jean-Pierre Protzen, which holds that all of this was accomplished with stone hammers and grit. What is truly disturbing is that this is not a debate. For the most part, the academic world has simply refused to engage with the engineering data, the evidence of machining, the problem of the interior corners, the mystery of the drill holes. These points are not refuted. They are ignored. The official story is protected by a wall of silence. It raises a deeply uncomfortable question. Why? Why would a field dedicated to uncovering the truth of the past be so violently opposed to looking at physical evidence that contradicts its established narrative? This is no longer about scientific disagreement. It feels like a deliberate refusal to acknowledge uncomfortable facts. What story, what entire version of human history is being protected by dismissing these stones as nothing more than the product of primitive patience. What is so dangerous about the truth written in the rock that it must be ignored at all costs? Here is where the investigation takes a dark turn. Away from the ancient stones and into the modern halls of academia. On one side, you have the forensic evidence presented by engineers and manufacturing experts like Christopher Dunn, men who spend their lives working with the physical realities of shaping hard materials. They present a case based on tool marks, precision measurements, and the unmistakable signatures of machining. On the other side, you have the mainstream archaeological conclusion, represented by figures like Jean-Pierre Protzen, which holds that all of this was accomplished with stone hammers and grit. What is truly disturbing is that this is not a debate. For the most part, the academic world has simply refused to engage with the engineering data. The evidence of machining, the problem of the interior corners, the mystery of the drill holes, these points are not refuted. They are ignored. The official story is protected by a wall of silence. It raises a deeply uncomfortable question. Why? Why would a field dedicated to uncovering the truth of the past be so violently opposed to looking at physical evidence that contradicts its established narrative? This is no longer about scientific disagreement. It feels like a deliberate refusal to acknowledge uncomfortable facts. What story, what entire version of human history is being protected by dismissing these stones as nothing more than the product of primitive patience? What is so dangerous about the truth written in the rock that it must be ignored at all costs?